And I want to welcome everybody into the Fifth Dimension podcast with me, Evan McDermott. I want to thank you for tuning into this episode. And for today, we're going to be talking about the idea of awakening to the natural state that is within us ultimately, and how do we go beyond certain layers of conditioning, the veils of identity that really have been placed upon us. And this is a topic that is coming directly out of my book, the new book, The Story of Interconnectivity. There is a chapter called Awaken Within. So if you're interested in that book, be sure to head on over to the episode description, and you can click on the links below to purchase yourself a copy. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Lulu. My new creation. It's been out a week now, and I'm really excited to bring that to the world. It's definitely been sort of my creative calling the last few months, on top of this podcast, of course. But do go check that out, and especially after we dive into some of these concepts, we go a little bit more in depth on the book. But I'm going to discuss these at length, and this is actually the first of a sort of series of podcasts that I'm going to be doing, where I discuss some ideas from the book, but also there's going to be a few episodes of the podcast that tackle some of the larger philosophical questions and how it all relates into society today. So it's something I'm excited to begin doing and incorporating a little bit more on the podcast. It's something I've been wanting to do. Don't have just interviews, but also sort of tackling these larger questions. So before we jump into this one, if you're a fan of the show, be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, whatever your platform is. And you can also follow us on social media at the Fifth Dimension Podcast, and also at Evan McDermott on Instagram. So, the idea of awakening, waking up to who it is we really are. And I want to start with a quote by Warren Buffett, and I opened the chapter of the book with this quote as well. And I think it's quite telling in terms of where we are as a collective right now, and sort of how we converse in the narratives we sort of feed and are fed. So it's what the human being is best at, is interpreting all new information so that their prior conclusions remain intact. And we see this playing out very much on the collective level right now, with censorship, with the echo chambers, with people not wanting to hear different opinions, whether it be politically or about the coronavirus pandemic we got going on. And people don't like their opinions to be challenged. People think that their worldview is the only correct worldview. And the reason for this is because of the layers of conditioning and the layers of ideology that we've really began to just place upon ourselves. And we begin to define ourselves by those layers. And when we do that, we can really see where the seeds of misery are planted, because we're so confined that we don't open ourselves up to the possibility of more. We don't open ourselves up to the idea that we can create something better, both on the individual level and collective level. So really what we have to start with is asking, who are you? Who is it that you are past the conditioning? Who is it that you are beyond the quote-unquote self, right? Is there a self? I mean, ultimately, all the self is conditioning. All the self is what we have been told. I mean, you could go to a party, right? You introduce yourself, you have your basic surface level introduction. I mean, I could tell you, I'm Evan McDermott, I got a podcast, I wrote a book, I'm white, I'm a male. You can go all into these constructs of identity, but is that truly who I am? Ask yourself. You can think about this on your own front too. Is that who you truly are, or is that what you are recognized in terms of status within this social matrix that we are living in? And it's a valid question. Ultimately, we're never going to really be able to answer who is the human, what is the human experience, and give a concrete definition right now. It's all very abstract, and the answer doesn't even necessarily matter. It's more about unpacking the conditioning and unpacking the layers of identity. And in the book I lay out 12 different ideas of constructs, and within the book, in these 12 constructs, there's activities to engage with these parts of the self. And that's what we're going to do right now. I mean, some of the constructs that I'm going to be focusing on, I'm not going to talk about all 12. In particular, one of them that I'm going to talk about right now is death. And this is something that is the inevitability in all life. That's the only guarantee in this life, is that you are going to die one day. And most people live in complete denial of that. At all times, they do not want to face death. They do not want to face with their own mortality. And ultimately, what this does is create a fear of living. It creates a fear of new ideas. It creates a fear that the life they have been living right now is not optimized to their fullest potential. Maybe they are not using their talents. Maybe you're not living to your purpose or your calling. But ultimately, we're all going to die one day. And when you have that revelation, you fully embody in that, and you experience what death means, it can be very heart-wrenching, because we cling so tightly to our identities. We cling so tightly to this temporary existence, right? I mean, that's the cause of all suffering, is attachment. And the first attachment that we have in life is life itself. We don't want to let go of it. That's why so many people are afraid of death and do not want to really talk about it. That's why they don't want to face it. And you have to ask yourself, what is my relationship with death? Do you have a positive relationship with it? I'm certain most people do not. I'm ready to die. Like, no, that's not what we want to be thinking. But what is your relationship with it? Are you willing to face death and integrate the idea of death and explore it further? I've been doing this for the last 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years. And my first brush up with death came when my father passed away. I was with him when he passed. I was in the hospital room, held his hand. It was 1 a.m. in ICU. He took his last breath. And seeing death really put me face to face with my own mortality, right? But what I've come to realize is that death is simply transformation. And how do I know that? It's because I still feel his energy. I'm still able to communicate with him, whether it be in the form of dreams or deep in meditation, able to communicate, have conversations, feel the guidance of his energy. And that's certainly maybe not what everybody is going to do when somebody is passed on, but death is simply a transformation. The Bhagavad Gita really puts death into perspective for me as well, and that's such a timeless text for so many different reasons. But they talk about the idea of war, right? And I'm actually going to do a podcast later on about whether war is justifiable. It's going to be one of my philosophical ones. And one of the ways he was justifying it was this idea of, we are all one. We're all interconnected. And we're all of the same source. And what this human experience is just the universe manifesting itself into a physical reality, right? So our true nature comes in being one with all, being the universe. That is our energy. When we go deep in meditation, we feel that oneness, we feel that presence, right? And what happens is when we die is we unmanifest. We're no longer manifested into this physical plane, but yet our soul is still existent. We are still that energy. We are still one. So it's just a transformation. It's just a transition from a physical manifestation into an unmanifested, non-physical entity, if you will. So when you look at death from that perspective, it really isn't so scary. It really isn't so scary. So one of the things that you can do to sort of drop a lot of fears within life is to come to terms with death. And the coronavirus is a perfect example of how people are so plagued by the fear of their own mortality that they're willing to give up anything to stop the idea of death. They're willing to inject poison, I'll say it, poison into their body, an unproven vaccine, because they think it's going to save them. Save them from what? What is there to be saved from? There is nothing to be saved from. Ultimately, regardless of what your thoughts are on the coronavirus, it's very easy to see how people have been manipulated in their fear of death, and they'll give up their personal freedoms and they will give up their lives just for the idea, the comfort that maybe they are protected from death. And, if this virus was actually as deadly as they said it was going to be, I can understand some of the fears, but we won't go down the huge virus rabbit hole, just because I've done that plenty of times on this podcast with plenty of guests, and you can go back and listen to some of the doctors who have their medical opinions, as opposed to just me, who is not a doctor but does his own research. It's a 99.98 survival rate, so you can see how blinding the fear is and how wrapped in cognitive dissonance people get when it comes to facing death and facing fear. So you have to awaken to those fears that come in, and the idea of who you are. What is your true nature? What is your energy? You are one. Death is just a simple transformation, and when you can truly embody this, everything else becomes easier. Everything else becomes less scary. The shadows are no longer scary. You can manifest any sort of irrational, illogical fear of the darkness into reality if you truly worry about it enough. So drop your fears, explore the idea of death, and, along with clinging to this life and our attachments, some of the other attachments and things I talk about, another idea is past traumas, right? So many of us have faced incredibly difficult upbringings, incredibly difficult, just horrific things that we don't want to live through again. But when it comes to our past traumas, we often hold on to them for this very same reason we hold on to life. It's all we know. And often we'll even plant sort of our own seeds of misery into, living with trauma and repressing it because we don't want to face it again, because we're not willing to let it go, because there is a fear of the unknown, of what falls afterwards. And in terms of past traumas, ultimately the number one way to look beyond them, to let them go, to make them no longer part of your identity that is constructed, is to face them head on. Write out your past trauma, write out every single detail that you can remember in great length. And it's not going to be easy to do so. This requires courage. This requires bravery. There's going to be fear, there's going to be resistance, and there is going to be pain, because that pain does not leave the body unless you face this trauma. And ultimately, you have a choice. Are you going to live with the trauma repressed inside of you and suffer forever until you die? Or are you going to face it, or are you going to try and heal it? It's not fair. You can say that. I agree. It's not fair. That sucks. We gotta deal with these things. It sucks. We gotta feel these, horrific events, and almost it can feel like we're living through them again when we try and heal them. But again, we have to face them. We have to let go of them, so we are not defined by them. A perfect example is sexual abuse, and this is a horrific example, but we see it countless times. Somebody is sexually abused when they are younger, and they live with that, and they suppress it, and don't acknowledge it, and what happens when they become older? They go and they sexually abuse somebody else. And certainly, obviously that's not everybody, it's a generalization, but I think it's over 90% of people who are sexual abusers were sexually abused themselves. So these traumas can tend to, define who we become, and they create self-fulfilling prophecies based around them. So we have to be willing to let go. We have to be willing to acknowledge that we are so much more, and we are strong enough to face traumas, and we are strong enough to move forward. And, oftentimes our past traumas can branch into another category that I talk about within the book, and that's beliefs about the self. How is it that you view yourself? What if you were to take write out a list of adjectives on how to describe you, being completely honest, being brutally honest, is that list mostly positive or is it mostly negative? And we have to be willing to understand that so many of these beliefs, so many of these ideas are not our own ideas. They were placed onto us. If somebody, when you were young, you're a child, tells you you're not going to do anything in life, and that is repeated over and over and over and over again, all your upbringing, what do you think's going to happen? You're going to internalize that, and you're going to believe that because that's what you were told. That childhood and innocence was shattered through negative trauma, through negative repetition, and you internalize this negative belief system about the self that is based on inadequacy and based on lack. So you need to be willing to analyze, how do I view myself? What is the relationship that I have with me, this identity? And, there's a great way to look at the identity. So I would say I'm Evan McDermott, right? If I'm introducing myself, if we look at it from the perspective of oneness, from the perspective that we are all one, that I am much deeper than Evan McDermott, I am source incarnated into this physical body, we can view it as me manifested here is in charge of babysitting Evan McDermott. Me manifested here is in charge of taking care and ensuring an optimal life for Evan McDermott. And when I look at it from that perspective, what is it that I'm going to do? I'm going to treat this incarnation, this identity, with love and with nurturing, because it's my job as source to take care of this identity that I am in charge of watching over and babysitting, right? So put into perspective who it is that you are, and what the belief systems that you're holding about you, and how they ultimately drive your life, how they ultimately drive your behaviors, your impulses, your ideas, your creativity. So many things that we do in life are driven through the unconscious. Almost all thoughts, I think it's around 90% of thoughts, actions, driven from the unconscious. And if we're holding negative belief systems within ourselves, we are going to act on them unconsciously. The goal is to take these unconscious patterns and make them conscious. Get a better understanding of them so that we, as ourselves, as this identity in this reality that we're in right now, can create a better life for ourselves. So we can create a better world for ourselves. And ultimately shatter the narratives of old. Shatter the idea that you are not worthy or you are coming from a place of lack. You are whole. You are infinite. You are source incarnated. There is nothing for you to fear because there is nothing that you cannot conquer. Take the leap of faith that you're meant to and step into your full potential. Step into your purpose, your talents. These are ideas that I talk about within this chapter as well. Your talents. What is it that you're good at? Everybody's good at something. Everybody is incarnated here so that they can explore their talents and their unique expression, their soul's purpose. Every soul has a purpose on this world, something that extends far beyond the individual self, something that is connected deeply to a higher power. And what is that higher power for you? I mean, how you explain that is going to be different, but it all goes back to this idea that we are one. And through our unique gifts, through our unique expression, our diverse expression, we can give our gifts. We can make a difference in this world. And that's what it's all about. That's what the spiritual journey is all about. That is why we make these unconscious belief systems conscious. So we can take what little control that is available, we can take control of that, right? I mean, so many things happen in life where it's beyond our control, and we have to be willing to acknowledge that, but you have the ability to create your reality. And the reason for that is because your perception is what creates reality. That's all there is in this life. So really, it's up to you to make these parts that exist within inside of you, to get an understanding of them, to look at them, to love them, to nurture this identity that has been given to you at birth in this human life, and to optimize it. Can you imagine what the world would look like if everybody was optimized, everybody was self-actualized, living to their full potential, and we were living in a world where everybody does have that equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, but equality of opportunity to be the best versions of ourselves and put our purpose into action, put our talents into action, rid of the old self-beliefs of lack into a new earth of wholeness and love and fulfillment for everybody. It sounds all right to me. So some of the other ideas that we talk about are pretty relevant to the societal narrative right now in terms of how do we define ourselves. I've been trying to take a sip of tea for the last 5 minutes, and I finally did. But some of the ideas that I talk about also within this chapter look at ideas such as nationality, culture, race, religion, right? So in terms of nationality, I'm just going to touch on this real quick. I'm from America. There's certain things about America that I love. I love the entrepreneurial opportunity. I mean, look at me right now. I'm creating my reality. I'm able to do what I want to do full time, not working for the man. I mean, the man can shove it up his ass. So I'm not trying to work under him. But I love the entrepreneurial opportunity here. I love the sort of diverse cultures that exist within America. But ultimately, what is nationhood? What is nationhood? It's a convenient system of organization. That's all it is. When we divide ourselves solely on the basis of nationhood, and we really, really define ourselves by that, we are planting internal seeds of division, oftentimes unconsciously. It's very difficult to live in connection with oneness when you are super attached to the idea of a nationalistic superiority. It's not oneness within one country, it's oneness with the whole earth, with all living beings. And so there is certainly room for differences of expression, and I think we should celebrate those. Oh, you're born in Guatemala? Let's celebrate that. That's awesome. Must be some rich culture there that we can really bring out and celebrate and see what it's all about to be raised in this culture. Same with America, same with China, same with Japan, same with any country you list in the world. Great, there are some unique things that we can really dive into. The same with race. What is race besides white, black? It's all labels. Certainly unique expressions, unique experiences that we can celebrate, but we are all one. We go beyond nationhood, we go beyond color, we go beyond language, we go beyond all of these identity constructs that the world seems to be obsessed with. And the reason we're obsessed with it is because the powers that be, on top of this illusionary hierarchical structure that we use as a system for convenient weaponization of human perception, it's been weaponized by the powers that be for the purpose of divide and conquer, so that we fight each other for differences in our expression instead of celebrating the uniqueness and the oneness. The uniqueness, the differences of expression, and the oneness. They both need to be celebrated, embodied, and remembered. That is how we create a society fueled by the pillars of love and interconnectivity. And imagine if everybody woke up tomorrow and said, fuck nationhood, fuck race, fuck all of the division. I'm going to love everybody. And everybody loved everybody for just being alive. That's the only requirement. There would be no reason for war, no reason for hate, no reason for division. It would all be gone. That is our natural state. That is what we are moving towards. That is what we are building. As soon as all of us, and this is an individual process, every individual needs to do this. That's why it's so difficult for us to, I guess you could say, bring this into a law. You can't bring this into law. This is all about individual remembering of this, because it exists within everybody. Once everybody engages in this process of self-discovery, of unpacking all of these different facets of what makes up identity, that is when we begin to create the world, like I was saying, fueled by love, interconnectivity. It goes way beyond constructs of nationality, of race. It goes way past your fears of death. It goes way beyond traumas and the beliefs you're holding about yourself. Ultimately, this is about optimizing you, your purpose, your talents, connected to a power far beyond the individual self, far greater than the individual self. And that's what we're creating right now. That's the purpose of my book. That's the purpose of all that I do. And, I'm not superior to anybody or inferior to anybody. I am simply one, expressing my truth and hoping to encourage others to do the same. So, if these ideas interest you and you want to dive a little bit deeper within them and sort of explore them, I would encourage you guys to go check out the book, because we have a reflective activity on sort of the 12 constructs that make up identity, and then we get into healing and how we could sort of work to optimize purpose and optimize your potential to create this life for yourself. So that's what the book is all about. Hopefully this chapter and this talk we found a little bit helpful in terms of what it's all about, in terms of awakening within, what it means to wake up, what it means to sort of see beyond the veils of illusion of separation that have been placed upon us. Because we all need to do this work. We all need to engage with what exists beyond the fabrics of identity. Because it's so deep. It's a deep abyss that never ends, and what a beautiful journey that is. I'm on the journey myself. Continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to uncover different fears, continue to discover who it is that I really am. And just the willingness to embark on this journey is the first step. So I would encourage you guys to all, don't hesitate on doing it. Keep going. If you're already on this journey, keep going. Keep exploring. Don't get caught up into the divisiveness and the division, into the craziness of the matrix that they want you to get caught up in. When you decide you're not going to engage with it, you see through it, and you're just going to love all and listen, that's all you got to do. Just keep going. Keep trying. Acknowledge when certain actions maybe are not carried out in the interest of loving oneness, and maybe they're from an unconscious belief pattern that's manifested. There's more work to do. Don't hold judgment against it. Just say, I see you, and I'm going to heal you. So that's going to wrap up this episode for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, found it helpful. Hope you guys liked the new intro music. I did. I thought it was time for a nice little change, just based on, we're 100-something episodes into this thing now. I felt like throwing down a little bit more of a different vibe. You know what I'm saying? I'm all about those new vibes all the time. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And like I was saying, go buy the book if you're interested in learning a bit more about these concepts. Awaken Within, that's chapter number 3. And subscribe to the podcast if you're a fan. There's going to be some great episodes coming out. I'm interviewing David Icke next week. Super pumped about that. Man, I'm super pumped about that. Super pumped. So check that. Be sure to check that out when it comes out. We got some other great interviews as well coming out that I'm excited to engage in and just keep learning from all these different voices that we're having on. So keep riding the fifth dimension train. It's going places. That is for sure. Be sure to find us on social media as well. Instagram at the Fifth Dimension Podcast. Also at Evan McDermott. And you can make a donation in the show if you'd like. There's a Venmo in the description below and a PayPal. I'm doing this stuff full time, so I wholeheartedly appreciate all the support I've been getting. But yeah, that's going to wrap up this episode, ladies and gentlemen. So subscribe, and I shall see you all next time. So long.